Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast. My name is Melissa, and this is Sammi. We are diving deep into conversations that connect and inspire. Stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Stories that take us to the heart of human connection. Please note that opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast. Please listen with your kindness and an open mind. Each story shared is authentic and vulnerable. Let's embrace our differences with empathy, knowing every voice enriches us. Together, let's cultivate a community of respect and curiosity. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired. Okay, welcome back to the Happy Soul Podcast, everybody. Today we are joined by Tori. We're so excited for you to join us, Tori. We were introduced to you through some other members in the SMA community, and we're so excited for you to join us for our SMA Awareness Month. Why don't you, we have so many questions that we want to ask you, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tori. I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Toronto. I have a disease called spinal muscular atrophy, which is a neuromuscular disorder that makes my muscles get progressively weaker over time. I am very, very passionate about accessibility and disability advocacy, and I have a travel blog where I highlight accessible travel for people that are specifically power wheelchair users, because I find that there's not always a lot of information when it comes to accessible travel for folks that have, a severe disability such as mine. So yeah, I just love to kind of highlight my life and travels with SMA on Instagram and TikTok and my blog. And I think it's just really powerful to be able to share stories and to create community from social media. So yeah, that's kind of what I do.
I love that so much. What started your passion for traveling? When did this begin for you?
Yeah, so I'll say I was very lucky. My parents have always, taken my sisters and I on family vacations every year from as early on as I can remember. So I was kind of always, used to traveling, used to seeing the world in different cultures. But I believe it was in 2017, I took my first trip without my parents, me and my best friend is also a wheelchair user and two of our caregivers. We actually went to London, England, and also to Paris. So that was obviously a really, really big trip for us to plan. As 21-year-olds, we'd never done that before without our parents. And kind of through that process of planning that trip, I just realized how much you really have to take into consideration when traveling abroad with a wheelchair, everything from transportation to hotels to making sure that you have your medical equipment there and that the voltage was the correct voltage to be able to charge my power wheelchair and not blow it up. There's literally so many different considerations that don't even have to do with the trip itself. And kind of when I started planning that trip, I realized, that it could be really useful for people with disabilities to be sharing their stories when traveling, because there's really not a lot out there. And I find, the bits and pieces that I can find online help me so much when I'm planning my vacations and planning my travels. So I kind of just wanted to add to that narrative.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I love the way that you just put that, Tori, saying that, you didn't say, I realized that travel was going to be really hard for me. You just said, there's a lot more for me to navigate. And I know that me figuring this out is going to help other people. Plus, I have a passion for it. So, so beautiful that that's your mindset around it. I love that. That's really awesome.
So cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
I forgot to mention one housekeeping thing I forgot to mention, Tori, was if you ever see us looking off to the side, we are not texting. We are not doing, we have our pens and paper and we're making notes because we don't want to interrupt each other and we don't want to forget our thoughts. So,
Okay, yeah.
so if you ever see us looking off to the side, it's because we're we just thought of a question and we want to make sure that we don't forget it. So
Yeah, no worries.
yeah. What is the hardest part about travel for you?
I think the hardest part about travel is often transportation. That can be a really big one. For me specifically, I need to be in my power wheelchair at all times because of my SMA. I don't have the muscle tone to be able to get out of my chair and sit in a regular seat in a car. My chair is 500 pounds. It can't just be folded up and thrown into the back of a regular car. So I need to have transportation that can not only take me, but can take my power wheelchair with me in it. Um, and that can often be very stressful because in a lot of cities, depending on where you're going, or, if you're going to, islands in the Caribbean, there might only be one accessible taxi on the entire island. So you have to really, I find that travel with a disability, you have to be very organized and you have to plan everything well in advance because, I can't just decide, oh, let's go out for dinner tonight, let's call an Uber, let's call a taxi. I often have to have these things booked weeks and months in advance. So I find that can be a little bit of a struggle, is not being able to make spontaneous plans as often as I'd like, because everything just has to be like so scheduled to make sure that I can get from point A to point B.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What a thing that, like, people don't think about unless you have to think about it, right? Like, that's an incredible amount of planning that must have to be for you. Like you said, if there's only one wheelchair accessible van in the destination that you want to go to, have you found that there's been limitations in that regard that have come up for you that you have challenged to be like, this needs to be more accessible for people in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely in a couple ways. So actually pretty recently I went on a trip to Costa Rica, and I'm not sure if you saw my video, but when I arrived in Costa Rica, our airplane didn't pull up to a jet bridge, so there was stairs to go down. And I had to be physically carried down a flight of stairs by about 4 men that I didn't know that just works at the airport in order to get off the plane. And, just talking about planning, I think that's often also the frustrating thing that comes out of traveling with a disability, is sometimes it doesn't matter how far ahead you plan and all the steps you take to make sure that something doesn't go wrong. Sometimes these things happen. And even though I had, called the Air Canada medical desk and made sure that all the arrangements were in place for me to get off the plane without stairs, when we arrived in Costa Rica, that wasn't the case, unfortunately. So I think, I've really been pushing for greater awareness just on like the realities that wheelchair users have to face when we do travel. Because I think that a lot of industries like, the airline industry and various modes of transportation, they just don't quite realize like the intricacies that go into travel. And they don't, again, look at someone with a disability as severe as mine and realize that, it's not just a matter of us quickly getting out of our chairs and going down a couple steps. Like, for me, whether it's 2 steps or 10,000 steps, it may as well be the same because I can't do steps regardless, right? So I think, just to me, that's also why I share my stories on social media, is just to bring awareness, because I think that the more we talk about these realities, the more that all of these industries are like, oh yeah, that's actually not great and that's not how it should be. And we can make improvements to fix this.
Oh my gosh. I saw that video and it looked terrifying, Tori. Like, I was gobsmacked. Like, so did they know that they were going to have to do that before they landed the plane? Did they know that that's how you were getting off the plane before they landed the plane? Or that was like in the moment, oh shoot, something is broken, we have to do it this way?
No, nothing was broken. So that airport did have jet bridges. So I'm entirely not sure what happened. I don't know if it was a communication breakdown. What I have been told is most likely happened is the airlines have to pay a premium to park at a jet bridge versus to have stairs. And apparently Air Canada Rouge often doesn't pay for the stairs. I mean, sorry, for the jet bridge, they pay for stairs because it's cheaper. So the
Even though,
airport,
oh,
yeah, the
sorry,
airport did have jet bridges. So there was a way for me to get off the plane in a much safer way than I did, but it was most likely that Air Canada did not want to pay for that extra upcharge.
even though they knew you were on that flight and you'd called the medical desk and you'd done
Yeah,
all your planning.
yeah, I had called
Oh,
Air Canada medical desk months in advance. I mean, my family and I travel all the time, so we're very well
mhm.
seasoned travelers and know the exact process. And yeah, I had my doctor fill out all the paperwork. I had confirmed that I would be traveling with a power wheelchair and that I can't do steps and that I would need assistance. All that stuff we confirmed multiple times over the phone. And also when we got to the check-in desk at Toronto Pearson, again, they saw me in my power wheelchair. They confirmed that I couldn't do steps, that I needed an aisle chair to get on and off the plane. And at no point in that process were we informed that this would be how I have to get off the plane. So yeah, it was a shock to us when we landed.
Was that trip with your family or was that like another one that you did on your own?
That was with my family. Yeah, I was going for my cousin's wedding. So there's actually a really big group of us that went. And all of us took separate airlines, and every airline but ours had the jet bridge. So I do think that more than likely it was just like an Air Canada issue. Because Delta pulled up to a jet bridge, Sunwing pulled up to a jet bridge, and so did WestJet. So I'm not sure why Air Canada chose not to, but and I'll never know. But yeah.
Oh my gosh.
To talk about. If it is, we do not have to go here. I just wonder because, like, when I saw that video, I was struck by so many parts of it. And, you know, talk about awareness that there were so many things going through my mind about, like, a lot of things that I would have never thought about in travel as I was watching that. And I am, first off, so sorry that you went through that because that is just so, it just must have been so terrifying. But if it's not too difficult to walk us through, when the plane landed and when you first found out, holy shoot, they're not going to connect to the right place and I'm going to need to somehow get down these stairs. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I think honestly, it was a very scary moment. My mom was beside me in the window seat and she looked out the window of the plane and saw all those steps. And I mean, immediately we were like, oh no, they must be moving us. Like they must be unloading all the passengers and then they're going to pull us up to a jet bridge. And then when we asked the flight attendants, they're like, no, like, nope, it's just this. We're going to carry you off the plane. Um, and it was a really terrifying experience. I think, especially also the people that came to help me get off the plane. We were in Costa Rica, so we were in a Spanish speaking country. So we also didn't speak the same language, which meant that I couldn't properly communicate, how I needed to be lifted, how I needed to be transferred, where it was most comfortable for me. And so yeah, honestly, like all I can say is that it was frightening. And it felt like such a not dignified experience. Because like I said, like they just kind of came on the plane and they picked me up. And I mean, I know I mentioned in my Instagram video as well, like the chair that they carried me down in was also broken and had clearly been broken for a very long time. So it was just terrifying. And the experience was not just unsafe for me, but it was also unsafe for all of those workers that were put in that position who should have never been put in that position because there were safer alternatives to get me off the plane. It was just, again, really cost. Air Canada didn't want to pay for that. and also efficiency. It would have taken longer to move our aircraft to a jet bridge and get me off safer, and it would have taken minutes to carry me off the plane. And I think in industries like this, it's just all about speed. They load people off the plane and back on within minutes time, and they don't want any delays. So yeah, I think it's just really hard to know that like my safety and their safety was put at risk for efficiency, more or less.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
Did
That's so awful.
did getting back on a plane to go home, was that smoother in Costa Rica?
Not really. So we got to the airport, and we asked them specifically because I had the video on my phone and I hadn't posted it yet because I was on vacation, and so I hadn't, posted anything yet. But my parents showed them the video and was like, "This is how she had to get off the plane. Like, we're not doing this again. Like, will there be a jet bridge?" And the guy was amazing, and he was so nice, and he was like, "Oh, of course. Like, there's going to be a jet bridge. Like, there's no way that they wouldn't, that they would do this again." And then when it came time for boarding, there was stairs again. And the look of shock on my face and my parents' face. And we were like, "You told us that there was going to be a jet bridge." And he was like, "I'm so sorry. I thought there was. And like, I don't know. I don't know what happened." And so we were trying to be like, "No, like, we're not comfortable with this." And they were kind of like, "Okay, then don't get on the plane." Like, they didn't really give us an option. So I will say it was smoother in the fact that because there was that person there that was able to speak English, my parents were able to talk to them. And we decided that it would be safer and more comfortable for me to just have my father physically pick me up in his arms and carry me up onto the plane, because I did not want, to be put back in that chair that was broken and carried down, the same way that I was carried down. So yeah, my dad just ended up picking me up in his arms and carrying me up all those stairs. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's just frustrating because even the person right up until minutes before boarding was like, "No, you're good. Like, it's going to be accessible. No worries." And then it comes time to actually board and they're like, "Oh, never mind."
Did you guys write into Air Canada and tell them about this experience?
Yeah, Air Canada never really commented back except for like the public comments that they gave to journalists and whatnot.
What?
Basically just saying that they followed all protocols and procedures, and that they would basically look into their protocols for future. It was just a very like fluffy statement, just being like, "Yeah, we did everything right."
Oh my God, I'm so angry for you, Tori. I'm so angry for you.
Okay,
That's wild.
And Sammi, I don't know if you saw this, and after this, I do like I don't want to stay in a negative. Like, I hope I'm not dragging us down. Like, I do want to. I have more questions about travel and the positive things and
Same,
stuff like
yeah.
that. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. I was floored because then I saw your next post and it said something about taking a break from socials, and I was like, "What is she talking about?" And then I went and dove into the comments and I was like, "What the what?" I could not believe the amount of negative comments you got in that video. Like, I was hot. Like, I was so angry. I'm floored that anybody would have the audacity to say anything negative to you when you are doing such a beautiful thing for the world. I am floored that anybody would have the audacity to say anything. Like, if you don't have anything nice to say, take your hands off the keyboard. But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with trolls on the internet saying really horrible things and then turning yourself around and focusing on the light, focusing on the positive, focusing on what your mission is and what you're passionate about, and going back to what you're passionate about? Like, how do you turn that around for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was just as shocked as you were when I saw all those comments. I think that video definitely got to the wrong side of Instagram. And I was just in disbelief at the number of people that, called me entitled, that, how dare I ask for this, that I put those people at risk, that I should just stay home and not travel if I can't walk. All these kind of just crazy things that I could never even imagine someone saying to me. And I don't know, I think it's been tough, but honestly, it's fueled me to keep going forward, because I think what I've realized from those comments is how much ableism there truly is in the world, and so much hatred, and also just how much education still needs to be done, in terms of disability rights. And I think, I mean, obviously there are just a lot of hateful comments, and I can't change that. I think those are people that are just truly unhappy with their own lives, and they need to take it out on someone else. And you know what? That's for them. I can't change that. But I also think that there are a lot of comments that just come from a place of like not understanding, and not having anyone in their life that has accessibility needs, and really not understanding the true realities that disabled people face every single day. So when I see a lot of those comments, it did hurt a lot at the beginning, but it also just made me realize, like, okay, wow, like there's still so much work that needs to be done. Because I think when you're in your own little circle of like, a lot of my friends are disability advocates, and all the people I hang out with, like, they have me in their lives and they have other disabled people in their lives. So I don't experience, these trolls in my real life. So I guess it kind of just made me realize that these kind of people are out there.
Wild. I didn't see those comments, Tori, but I'm really sorry that you experienced that. I can't even imagine saying such horrible things to somebody. But I know, like you said you had to take a break on your social media because of a lot of those comments, but at least what you're sharing with us, I'm not saying this is all of it, but at least what you're sharing with us, your mentality around it and the grace that you're giving to people, is really beautiful. It's really beautiful. It's people who maybe don't deserve it, but I think it's beautiful that you're doing it anyways.
Thank you. Yeah, I did have to take a break, like especially at the beginning. I mean, that video on Instagram is up to over 60 million views on Instagram, which is just wild. Like, I don't know how that happened. That's more than the population of Canada, which is very hard for me to wrap my mind around. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people saw it. So I think that, like, just the overwhelming number of hate comments was really hard to digest at first. But also with that, I got an overwhelming number of positive comments and amazing people that have reached out to me and said, that I have a daughter with a disability, or my dad has a disability, and like you've inspired me to travel, and people that are reaching out to me and asking me for travel recommendations, and how they can start doing what I do. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that the community that, social media brings is, means so much more than all of the hate. Because the hate, I can just put away. I just turn off my Instagram notifications. I don't pay attention to that. But all of the really beautiful, powerful messages that I get from people saying that I'm impacting their lives, even if it's just one person, to me, it's worth it. Like, I don't care if I get 2,000 horrible comments, as long as I get one amazing one saying that I've impacted someone's life in a way. So that's how I feel about it.
What a good heart you
Mic
have.
drop. Yes.
Yeah, mic drop for sure. What a good heart you have about that, Tori. Oh my goodness. Sorry, that's such a beautiful mindset that you have around that, Tori, and that your heart around the way that you receive the beautiful, the nice comments that people are saying, and the grace that you give to those who have the negative comments. That's a really hard thing to keep, because you can get really angry at people like that, and I'm sure that it happens, but the way that you're bringing yourself around in that way is really beautiful. Like, good for you. You have a much stronger heart than many people do. a much smarter brain as well than many people do. I want to ask you, before we started recording, you had told us that you work for a talent agency that represents the disabled population. Can you speak about that for us? Like how you got into that work, what that looks like, what your company does, what you do for that company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a talent agent at an agency called Hello Inclusive. So we are a not-for-profit talent agency that specifically represents people with disabilities and people's visible differences in the modeling and acting industry. So the company was started, I think, 2.5, 3 years ago out of Edmonton by a woman named Katie McMillan, and her daughter has a disability. Her daughter has cerebral palsy. And she started the agency because she was trying to get her daughter into modeling and realized that none of the agencies in Alberta were really equipped to, to help in terms of like provide work to a model with a physical disability. A lot of like the audition spaces were completely inaccessible, and they really didn't know how to advocate for accessibility on set. So yeah, she decided to open up her own agency to give her daughter opportunities within the modeling industry. And it's expanded so much within the past 3 years. I mean, we have over 200 people on our roster, mostly within Canada, but we're also expanding into the US and parts of the UK as well. And it's just been really amazing because I think disability representation in the media is lacking so much. And it's often like there's such a high barrier to entry for, any actor to get into the industry in Canada, but specifically actors with disabilities. A lot of theater schools are not accessible. Audition spaces are not accessible. Just like casting directors and producers, they don't have the education on how to have someone with a disability on set, even if they want to. And because a lot of the times they don't know how, they just choose not to. So that's kind of where Hello Inclusive comes in, and also why we're a not-for-profit agency, because it's not only that we want to give employment opportunities to people with disabilities, but we also do a lot of work in terms of educating the industry on how to continually be more inclusive.
So does that mean everything around like how to include them in the scene, how to set up set so that they can be there? Like, is that all encompassing in what you're talking about there?
Yeah, exactly. So even just simple things of like, when you go on set and there's trailers, often, most of the time, those trailers aren't accessible, or, there's no accessible bathroom on set. So we're not only there as like the talent agent, but also to advocate for what our models and our actors need to make sure that the whole experience can be as inclusive as possible.
That's awesome. That's
That's so cool.
yeah. I like, and it's these things like, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, Tori, for many reasons. But just like you said earlier, when you were talking about people don't know what they don't know, like those are things that have never crossed my brain. Like I know when I've seen a movie, there was a movie I watched a couple months ago, and it was like a dance party scene, and they had someone in a wheelchair in that scene. I was like, good for you, movie set, for having someone in a wheelchair in this scene. And I was all jacked about it, but like the nuances of how to make that happen, and that it needed to be different than that, it might need to be different, it not necessarily might need to be different, never even occurred to me. And so like that is so cool that that's what that company is doing, obviously getting jobs for these actors, but also helping sets make it happen, because that's like it's a gap, right? If you can be like, I want that person on, but you don't know how to fill the gap into how to get there, right? So man, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
So cool.
Yeah, of course.
I love it. I just love all the ways that you're working. So it's like you're challenging people to just think differently. Or like when you said, I just had this ping of like, oh my gosh, when you said they don't even know how to, so they're just gonna not do it at all, as opposed to learn how to do it. Let's learn how to make it happen. Like it's the same with the airplane. Learn how to do it. Make it happen then. Like,
Exactly.
go
I
the
think
extra step.
are a lot of like preconceived notions that like accessibility is so costly or it's so cumbersome and there's so much to learn. And I feel like a lot of industries just have this like this idea that it can't be done, or if it can be done, that it's just so much work that it's not worth it. Um, and that's absolutely not the case. I mean, whether we're talking about airlines or whether we're talking about movie sets, you know, accessibility and inclusion doesn't have to be complicated. And the thing is about inclusive design and accessibility is that once something is accessible, that means everyone can use it. And I think that that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's like, oh, we have to have this special accommodation for this one person. We have to build a whole ramp for one person. And it's like, no, ramps can be used by everyone. Ramps can be used by people who walk. Ramps can be used by people in wheelchairs. They can be used by, parents with strollers. Anyone. Like accessibility literally benefits everyone. And I think we need to stop thinking about accessibility and inclusion as like a special exception and start thinking about it as the norm, because it truly, truly benefits every single person.
I love that.
Yeah, and
That's
isn't
so
it
awesome.
wild that it's taking us this long to get on that train?
It's wild.
It's so wild.
It's wild how slowly it feels like from the outside looking in, it feels like it's moved very slowly. Like I feel like we were having this discussion when I was in school, and that was a little bit ago. and I feel like how has this not changed? Like, man, it's wild. Do you know what the thing that I saw on Instagram, that airplane thing with the seat in the airplane? I saw that and I was like, instantly like, yes, why isn't it like this already? And why don't all airplanes do this? Like, this is so great. Do you know if that's something that is in works of happening, or if it's happened? Like, do planes have those now, or they're
No.
working on it?
They're working on it. So that was a prototype by Delta, which is amazing. Delta definitely seems to be like the industry leader in terms of like airline accessibility. So yeah, that was a prototype, but the really amazing thing is that it's being like tested right now. I mean, it's already gone through all like the safety testing and everything, but it's just in like the final stages of testing. So apparently, according to Delta, it should be like within the last 6 months of approval, and then at which point it will be able to be installed onto aircrafts. And the amazing thing about that prototype is that, that's not like a whole new aircraft has to be built. That is a prototype that the first row of seats in every airplane can be taken out and replaced with those seats. And that would allow a wheelchair user to stay in their wheelchairs when on a plane, which would be such a game changer for accessibility, because there are so many people with disabilities right now that actually physically are not able to fly because they can't get out of their wheelchairs at all. If you think about people that use ventilators on their wheelchair, they need to stay in their wheelchair. They can't transfer out into a regular chair. There are countless disabilities that, this would be a game changer for, that would actually allow people to travel and experience the world in ways that they haven't been able to before.
Yeah, so good.
Amazing. Did you say you're also a model?
I started out with Tello as a model,
Okay.
and then I kind of transitioned into working behind the scenes for them. But I did do a little bit of modeling work before I moved over to the talent side with them.
So cool. Kate, I saw a reel and you were talking about this, and I wonder if you can maybe touch on this. Sammi, tell me if I'm like taking the conversation into another turn here, but can you talk to us a little bit about clothing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think clothing it's something that I've struggled with as a person living with SMA and, having to sit in my chair all day. I mean, I think clothes can be kind of uncomfortable for everyone.
Mhm.
But when you're sitting in a wheelchair all day, just like buttons dig into you and like, I will be up in my wheelchair from the time I wake up in the morning until the time I go to bed. So over 16 hours, I'm sitting in my chair without a break. So I need what I wear to be completely comfortable and functional for me, which is tough when you also, are in your young early 20s and want to be fashionable as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think, you know, I found kind of things that work for me. One of my favorite little hacks is instead of wearing regular jeans because the buttons dig into me, I like to wear maternity jeans because they have that nice stretchy elastic waistband. And that's so much more comfortable for me when I'm sitting in my chair all day. So yeah, I think there's just little hacks that I found that work for me. I find that often adaptive fashion or fashion that is specifically marketed as accessible or adaptive is either very like patient like it looks like clothing that you wear in a hospital or clothing that only seniors would wear. Or if there are fashionable options, they're often just so expensive because they're targeted at such a small segment of the population. So yeah, for me, I don't necessarily buy adaptive fashion all that often, but I just kind of know little hacks that work for me and kind of make it work that way.
So smart. The
To-
maternity pants, that's so smart.
I mean, I know lots of women who get pregnant and never take off their maternity pants afterwards. They're like, nope, these are way better than regular jeans. I'm living
Oh
in
yeah,
these now.
they're amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Tori, it's like, I know we keep saying this, but like, you're mind blowing me with how many different ways you are focusing on making a difference for other people in the way that they live and the way that the world is accessible to them. Like, it's not just travel. It's not just in like acting and part of an agency. It's not just in comfortable clothing. Like it's all three of those, and I'm sure so many more ways that we haven't talked about yet that you are making a difference, making an impact, and trying to change the world for so many people. Like it's so beautiful, Tori. I'm like mind blown right now with everything that you've got going on that you're doing. It's really incredible. And you don't know me that well, so this might come across weird. I'm not just trying to pump your tires and get you excited. Like I don't say those kinds of things lightly. So I don't just say nice things to say nice things. I refrain from that. So like legitimately mind blown. It's really cool what you're doing. All the work that you're
Thank you.
doing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize like how many ways like disability intersects with like every aspect of my life. You mentioned travel and clothing and accessibility and even just simple things like getting around my home, like having furniture that's accessible to me. Like disability quite literally impacts everything I do. So I think that there are just so many conversations to be had. And I think, every industry, no matter what it is, can be more disability inclusive. And I just really like to talk about that because I think that's so important.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that's a great way for us to go and talk about like what that is like in your life growing up into now and having those accessible things. But what I mean is obviously, yes, it impacts every part of your life, but not everybody thinks of taking it the next step of not just how do I make this work for me, but how do I empower other people to not only make it work for them, but also people who have no knowledge of this and help them understand it better. Like that's what I mean is incredible. Obviously you have to live with it, but like the next step that you've taken it to is what's extra incredible is what I was trying to highlight. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So yeah, let's dive into that. Like are you open to going back into childhood growing up, like what that was like for you? I don't know, like when you were diagnosed with SMA and how that progressed in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to start or do you have a
No, yeah, I mean, I can ask more specifically if you'd like to, but if I was going to say like, because I don't know, with your age, you probably weren't diagnosed at birth, but maybe you were.
No, No, I was not diagnosed at birth. So I was diagnosed on my first birthday, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, I was exactly 12 months old. My parents noticed pretty early on because I have two older sisters. So my mom had, raised two children before and knew what typical developmental milestones look like. And she noticed pretty early on that I wasn't hitting all the normal milestones that my sisters had reached. So little things like I never tried to hold my bottle on my own. And another thing that she mentioned was that when she would hold me up on her lap, I wouldn't move my legs. And you know how babies will often, you hold them up on your lap and they'll try to jump and they'll try to move their legs and try to weight bear a little bit. And I never tried to do any of that. I never tried to roll over. My parents even said that, my cry was very, very quiet. Like my voice was just quiet and I couldn't really cry out that loud. And so it was just at a couple months old that they realized that something was wrong. They brought me to my family doctor a couple of times, and my family doctor just kept blowing my parents off and saying, you know what, she's just a lazy baby. She has older sisters, they probably do everything for her, like she'll grow out of it, don't worry. And I think that it was around 6 months old that my mom noticed that I didn't have a reflex. So when the doctor, tapped that thing on my knee, nothing happened. And that is a symptom of spinal muscular atrophy. So my mom pointed that out and was like, she doesn't have a reflex. And my doctor was like, there's no way, like, what are you talking about? And did it again. And was like, oh, you're right. And immediately referred me to Sick Kids, which is the children's hospital here in Toronto. And yeah, right away, like as soon as they saw me at the very first appointment, they kind of just looked at me and they're like, yeah, your baby has SMA. And I mean, they did all the blood tests and everything to confirm, but Sick Kids knew right away what it was that I had.
Wow. And do you know, I don't know if this is a question that you'll be able to answer or not, but do you know how that impacted things for your parents? Like, do you know if it made them feel more like, okay, like now we know, or how that shifted things for them at all?
I mean, I think that they were certainly happy to have a diagnosis, but it was also a really tough reality check because, this was 25 years ago that I was diagnosed. So there was no treatment back then. There's still no cure, but there was nothing on the horizon. There was nothing even, in clinical trials to help someone with SMA. So, at that point, they almost just kind of told my parents, like, yeah, you're gonna have to just like take her home and love her because the typical life expectancy for someone with her type of SMA is between like 2 and 5 years old. So kind of just like enjoy the time you have with her and there's nothing we can do. And I think that really hit my parents hard. But my parents were also fighters and they were immediately just like, no, that's not the case. Like, that won't be our daughter. And I mean, I'm really glad they had that mentality because I feel like, they never doctors told them that I wasn't going to live long, but they never believed that. And I think that was so amazing because they never believed that. They never let that impact like how they raised me, how I grew up, and giving me all the typical experiences that, my siblings had. So yeah, I'm kind of grateful for how they took that news.
Yeah. Do you know, I mean, it's obvious that your parents are fighters because you even talk about like the fact that they took you guys all traveling a lot. Like I feel like a lot of people, if they had a child in a wheelchair, they would say, I guess we can't travel. You know, like I feel like that would probably be a really common mentality, and it's a really unfortunate one because like you can travel, but I think that people would allow that to be a reason to hold them back. And so like you can tell that your parents are fighters just from the very first thing that you told us, saying that your parents took you traveling a lot as a kid. Like, yeah, they are. I mean, and obviously they raised you to be a fighter too, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. Like I think especially a lot of my friends that grew up with SMA or just other disabilities, I think it's a parent's natural instinct to just like want to protect you, want to shield you from anything bad in the world. And I had so many friends that their parents were like, no, we can't travel because what if this happens to your wheelchair? Or we can't do this because what if you get sick and you need to go to the hospital? And there's all these what ifs. And I think that my parents really never let those what ifs stop them. And I think that that's really shaped me into who I am today, because I think that if you know, you have to be willing to face those what ifs, because otherwise, what kind of life are you living?
Just mic drop there and the episode.
Yeah.
Like, holy smokes, Tori. That was so good. I'm just kidding.
You've got us when we're both silent because we're like,
Oh,
holy. Yeah.
So do you happen to remember, Tori, do you know at what age you needed a wheelchair?
Yeah, so I actually got my first wheelchair at the age of 2. So, and I needed a power wheelchair right from the time I was 2 years old. So I was a really cute toddler. I was bombing around in a little power wheelchair. Apparently they brought me like out into a parking lot and made a little obstacle course and like taught me how to drive my power wheelchair. Pretty much, I mean, before I could even talk, I was driving a power wheelchair.
Oh my gosh. I picture my 2-year-old in a power wheelchair and he would go crazy. So
I think I damaged a lot of walls when I was little. Just like had tire holes and doorways and all over the house.
Do you want to just talk about maybe growing up and what it was like to obviously your parents, you've got the power wheelchair at 2. So now your house is needing to be accessible to this power wheelchair, right? And like they must have had to shift some things around and stuff. And
yeah. So after I got my power wheelchair, my parents removed houses shortly after because we were in like a stacked townhouse. So it was just like completely inaccessible. So they ended up moving to a bungalow. And they kind of, did a lot of accessibility modifications to make that fully accessible to me. So they put a nice ramp in our backyard into the back door so that I could get in and out of the house. They also got a pool put in and a hot tub, which was really beneficial for me growing up, because the water is really the only place that I am able to freely move because, there's not as much gravity when you're in water. So my muscles are looser. I'm able to get a lot more range of motion. And although I can't do it now, when I was younger and I was a little bit stronger, I was actually able to like walk in the pool. So I spent a lot of time in the pool when I was younger, because it was really the only place that I truly felt free, and that I could move my body in the way that I wanted to. And then, in terms of other accessibility modifications, they put a lift in our garage so that in the winter we could just pull our van into the garage and I could go right into the house through the lift, meaning didn't have to go outside as much because the cold is really, really harsh on my muscles as someone living with SMA, because as soon as I get cold, my muscles seize up and then I can't move as easily. So staying warm is really beneficial.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's another thing I would have never thought about.
No, me neither. Thinking about the temperature.
That's wild.
I know you kind of chatted, you mentioned this earlier, Tori, like when you were first diagnosed, there was no treatment for anything. I know there's since been some treatments, some that have been given to, that are mostly for younger kids, like kind of given at birth more so then. And I know that there's one that Candace has been talking about that she's gained access to right now that she's gotten a 1-year approval for. Do any of those apply to you? Has there been anything in that realm that's impacted you or changed things for you in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, so I started treatment for SMA in 2019. So I'm on a different treatment than Candace is. I'm on a treatment called Spinraza. This is an injection that I get in my spine every 4 months, and it effectively does the same thing as the oral medication. It's just something that you don't have to take every day. Spinraza came out a little bit before Ristaplam did. So yeah, I was lucky to be able to get on it here in Ontario, and I know that's not the case for everyone. So I feel very grateful for the opportunity to be on Spinraza, and I'm doing really well on it. But there are still a lot of adults here in Ontario and in pretty much every province in Canada that don't have access to these treatments.
Wow.
So, two questions for you in that. Do you know why you were able to gain access when other people weren't? And then also, how long have you been on it, and what changes have you seen?
The reason that I was able to access treatment when a lot of adults weren't, honestly, was just because, unfortunately, I advocated really hard, and I don't think that that should be the case. I think that everyone should have access to it. I don't think that you should have to go to the media. And I mean, I spoke here at Queen's Park, in person numerous times. My parents and I had meetings with multiple health ministers and all the pharmaceutical companies, and it took almost 2 years of basically dedicating our lives to getting access to this treatment. And it's truthfully the only reason that I'm on it, and it breaks my heart because that just shouldn't be the case. And I think Candace went through a very similar story of, dedicating so much of her time to advocacy and to meeting with ministers and being able to prove her, her story and like why she deserves this. And my story was very similar. And yeah, I mean, you have to do what you have to do. I mean, that was the only way that I was able to get on it. It was the only way that Candace was able to get on it. But it's just a really sad system that we have to quite literally prove our worth as individuals and as valued members of the community just to be able to access something that's going to help our lives in so many ways.
Yeah.
What? This might sound like a silly question, but why is it so hard for people to why are they making it difficult for people to access it? Why is it not easily accessed? Like, are they giving reasons for that?
It's because it's so expensive. So Spinraza is $375,000 a year at market value, which is, it's a lot. Like, I won't lie, it's a lot of money. And these drugs are this expensive because they're rare disease drugs. So there's not a lot, when you take a drug for, say, I don't know, diabetes or acne or something like that, a large percentage of the population needs, the demand is high, so the price goes down. And when you take something with like SMA, which there are only, a handful of people in each province that need access to these treatments, the price is astronomical because the research and development that went into these treatments is so high. So the pharmaceuticals price these medications at these exorbitantly high prices. And the governments just don't want to pay for it. And from my parents and I, from all the advocacy work that we did, we actually found out that there is an actual formula that the government uses. Like, it's a real mathematical formula that they use to determine, like, based on your life expectancy and whatnot, if a drug is worth the amount of years it's going to give to you. Yeah.
No.
It's a real formula.
Sammi, you look mad.
I'm not shocked. So, I'm teary-eyed because it breaks my heart to hear those things, but
That is unreal. That it should just be illegal for pharmaceutical companies to be able to hike up the price of something because the demand is so low or so yeah. That's absurd. But anyways.
Absolutely. I mean,
Wow.
I think it's a twofold issue because I think, first of all, it's the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, these are pharmaceutical companies that are multi-billion-dollar a year industries that absolutely do not need to have the cost of their medications this high. But it's also the governments that are quite literally putting a value, an economical value on each person's life and saying, oh, well, it's a little too high, so no thank you. And I mean, yeah, it's horrible, but it's a twofold issue. And, you know, pharmaceutical companies aren't working with the governments, and governments are working with pharmaceutical companies, and it just becomes a huge mess.
Wow. That's unreal.
Such a mess.
That is unreal. Sammi, you had asked, what improvements have you seen on this medication? Have you seen improvements?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, Spinraza has really just helped stabilize my condition. But also, especially at the beginning, my physiotherapy scores went up quite considerably. So just little things that like I wasn't able to do before, like put my hand over from my lap to my joystick, or be able to type on my phone and do my work throughout the day without getting so fatigued. Like all those little things, which might seem so small to someone else, but truly impacts my life in like the most immeasurable ways. Because if I can't, you know, type on my phone, then I can't make money. Like I can't do my job. And if, you know, I need to be able to get through a 6-7 hour workday without getting exhausted. So yeah, to me, it's really just like help stabilize that, because SMA is a progressive disease. So without treatment, your muscles progressively get weaker over time. And sometimes, you know, for some people with SMA, they might go 5, 6, 7 years without seeing it decline at all. And then other stages in your life you might go through where you're rapidly seeing a decline and losing abilities every month or every year. So just like kind of having that peace of mind, knowing that my condition is finally stable and it's not going to get significantly worse, is huge.
Wow.
How long have you been on it, Tori?
I've been on it since 2019. So my treatment journey is a little bit messy because I was on it for a year and a half. Then I actually had to stop treatment for 2.5 years because of COVID. Because it's a hospital administered medication. And I wasn't able to continue getting it, essentially. Long story short. So I had to stop treatment for 2.5 years, and now I'm finally back on it.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So I have to get the injection through my spine. And because I have scoliosis and because I got spinal surgery when I was 11 years old, I have titanium rods in my back. So they don't have great access to be able to access my spinal fluid. So basically, after they had done injections for a year and a half, the scar tissue became too much, and I needed to have surgery in order to be able to continue the injections. And they discovered that I needed to have surgery right as all the lockdowns went down. So it wasn't necessarily like, if I could have just continued the injections, it would have been fine. But because I needed surgery and it was then determined that it was a non-essential surgery, I wasn't able to get the surgery, which therefore allowed me to continue the injections.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful for you spending your time and your energy with us today. Like I've learned so many things from you. I'm so inspired, and I know that you are inspiring a lot of people to do a lot of great things. And I don't know. I just think that you're doing really wonderful things, and I'm so grateful to have met you and be able to hang out with you for a little bit.
Thank you both so much for having me. It was so much fun.
I want to ask one more question to wrap up, Tori,
Yeah.
and then we'll let you go because we've got our hour. But I want to ask: is there like one thing that how do I want to put this question? One thing that you would like people to know about living with SMA, or living with a wheelchair, or living in a wheelchair, or living with a disability? One thing that you would like the world to know that you think might make a difference, or you can answer either or question, or one thing that you might say to a family that has a recent diagnosis with SMA.
Yeah. I think that if I were to give advice to someone who got a recent diagnosis of SMA, it would be that, your child is going to live the most amazing life. And disability and SMA, it's not a death sentence, especially not anymore. There are so many treatments on the horizon and so many advances in medical technology, and your child is going to live the most fulfilling life. And I think a lot of people think that disability is like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And it's truly just about your mindset. And if you just, raise your child like you would any other child, I promise you they're going to be just fine. And it might not be the life that you imagine for your child, but it's going to be a beautiful one nonetheless.
Oh, Tori, that was so good. That was such a good answer.
I love it so much.
I ditto everything Melissa said. Like, you just willingly jumped on a call with two people you did not know. Late at night for you, very late at night for you. And we're eternally grateful for your time, for your energy, for your openness and willingness to be on here and share your story and share the impact that you're making. We will make sure that we tag all of your things in the show notes for this episode, because we want people to find you. And yeah, just thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much, Tori.
Well, thank you. It was so great meeting you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To help support the growth of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review, follow us on socials, or recommend us to your friends. Your support honestly means the world to us. With love, Sammi and Melissa.